skipping your AC tune-up this year? Think again. Don't spend another season hoping your air conditioner works. Be sure with help from the team at Legacy. An annual tune-up keeps your AC running safely and efficiently when you need it most. Avoid costly repairs, breakdowns, and keep your AC running for years to come. Visit LegacyHeatingandAirInc.com for easy online scheduling and special offers and discounts. While you're there, sign up for an annual maintenance plan starting at just $13 a month and leave the worry to us.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral Notre Dame football YouTube show that has survived tornadoes and my technical limitations and my ability to get on a great guest co-host if I can point the right way. And that's Bob Morton, former Notre Dame offensive lineman, current Notre Dame director of regional development, current father of 4 wonderful children. Welcome, Bob.
Well, thank you, Eric. Let me just say, when I saw the stream is live in the middle of the countdown, I celebrated a little bit for you. So excited that everybody gets to see us from minute 1 today.
That's right. Boy, you didn't miss anything last time. I bumbled through things, and Bob was wonderful. But you're going to see it from start to finish today. And we are taking stock of Notre Dame football as summer school winds down to a close on Friday, and we count down to the start of training camp on July 31st. So Notre Dame remains at 86 scholarship players, one over the limit, as we're 3 days away from the end of Notre Dame's summer term. After Friday, players have to be back on campus on July 30th, which is 1 day before camp starts. As far as our show, a reminder to help us conquer YouTube's algorithm, please like, and hopefully you actually do like it, subscribe, and share this video. Also, we're taking your questions live, and we'll work them in as we get to different subject matter during the show. So feel free to fill up the queue. I do not have a tutorial on that, so you'll have to figure it out yourself because Tyler's not here to hold my hand on that. But I think we can handle everything else that's going on. And there's send me some questions. You can send both of us questions. So, Bob, we are going to start with our opening drive of preseason camp myths and reality. So you had how many different training camps? 5 with Notre Dame?
Yeah, 5. So came in the fall of 2002, along with Tyrone Willingham and staff, and head coach Willingham for 3 camps. And then Charlie Weiss came in during the off season, and I had 2 fall camps with Coach Weiss and staff.
That sounds great. And did you guys ever go to Culver, or was that not part of that era?
That was not part of it for us. Yeah, we just set up a really big tent in between O'Neill and McGlynn Hall, which was convenient
Right.
for the 3 years I lived in O'Neill. I got to be in my room that I was going to be in for the entire semester. And, yeah, we just basically lived between the fields that now have dorms on them, actually, the tent in between the dorms and South Dining Hall. So we existed there for a couple weeks.
That sounds great. So, you know, did all 5 years you guys have 2-a-days?
We did, yeah. There was any hopes and dreams of 2-a-days being cut short or being lessened did not happen till after us. I think we had the pipe dream kind of dangled in front of us that there was a chance they were going to limit contact or limit the hours that we could practice, but that was definitely after us.
Okay. So before I get into the difference, because there are no 2-a-days, there's less contact, there's fewer full speed game-like practice situations during fall camp. But what are your memories of 2-a-days?
There were a lot of ugly ones,
Okay.
honestly, So, there's, for us linemen, we're trying to figure out ways to regulate heat. And oftentimes we're a little bit bigger in the midsection, and so we like to have a shirt that covers the big old belly. But when you've soaked through a shirt, it's actually keeping heat in. So we would have our trainers. Jim Russ was the guy who was kind of notorious for it, who would come with a pair of like surgical scissors and like cut off the entire like midsection of our shirts so that our skin would be able to breathe, our sweat would evaporate and not just sit there. So there'd be days that the entire offensive line would be forced into wearing crop tops, and that was, I'm sure, a sight for many, many sore eyes. But we'd have giant trash cans that we'd hop into full of ice water. We were taking ice baths before it was a sexy thing to do. Before they actually made ice baths, it was literally just big trash cans with bags of ice. And then the other thing is, like, there was just a lot of fighting. I mean, there would be, maybe second, third day of practice. We'd know going into the practice that, somebody on the offense wanted to run at somebody on the defense. And we just decided, okay, when those two get tangled up, find the nearest guy wearing a different color jersey and go after him. And sometimes those fights led to longer practices. Yeah, sometimes it led to shorter practices. Sometimes the fight spilled over on your side of the ball. My second year with Charlie Weiss, John Sullivan, Dan Santucci, and I, all really experienced linemen, got into a huge argument and were essentially excused from practice to go run around the field for the entirety of the 2-hour practice because we wouldn't stop fighting even when Coach Weiss told us to. So a lot of emotions that run high in that heat, but it really is just an amazing time to develop a cohesiveness, a cohesion, and who has your back for the entirety of the season.
That's interesting. So do you think, I know that we all, I've told my grandkids the whole story about, we walked through 10 feet of snow and the wind blowing in our face and all those things. But are these guys worse off? Are they less prepared going into a season because they don't have two-a-days, because there's less contact? Or do you think that there's been adaptations and that was just maybe not the best way to do things?
Yeah, so I'll say both and, right? I think they're definitely worse off. I don't think that you need to have 2 full padded practices and run your guys into the dirt and just have them, banging into each other play after play after play after play. But I do think that it takes the body time to get used to repetitive contact and to get your body in condition for the grind of that contact play after play. As much as I didn't love throwing pads on, most of the time my coaches would have us be full pads one practice and either just shells, just helmets, or just helmets and shoulder pads the second practice. Like they cared for us in the midst of those two-a-days, but we really needed that contact to make sure that we weren't going to be putting our bodies at a higher risk of injury early on in the season, because you need those full speed reps in practice before you go to College Station in 117-degree heat to get those full reps against the team that ultimately wants to run you into the ground. And so I think that specifically offensively, you need the reps of being exhausted and still having to make the right play call and the right decision making. I'm glad for the way things happen for me. I'm sure there have been advancements. I'm sure the coaches will adapt to getting these guys exhausted in some way to make them do that decision making while they're tired. But I worry for the first few weeks of the year what the injury sequence might be, because these guys aren't getting those hits out early when their bodies aren't quite into that conditioning mode yet.
Before we move on to the next part of this, I'm going to work in one question, and there's a couple of different aspects. So let's talk to this in terms of camp and then maybe big picture, and then we'll dive back into the discussion about training camp. So this is from Brian. Bob, how did Weiss and Willingham differ in coaching style? Let's start with camp, and then let's go to the bigger picture.
Yeah, so I mentioned I think that the guys now are worse off not having two-a-day practices, and I said specifically offensively. I think anytime you go to camp, it is inherently easier for the athletes on defense to get up to speed and shed blocks, chase down and tackle running backs, to just kind of be responsive and cover wide receivers. It takes an offense time to get into rhythm where you can put the defense in bad situations. And so when, what I remember the first few camps under Ty Willingham is that if you showed up and watched all of practice for like that first week of two-a-days, you would have thought that we had the worst offense in the entire country. Number one, we had some defenses that were performing well, right? You think of 2002, Shane Walton and Vontez.
2002 one was really good.
So we had a solid defense, but you look at that offensive line in 2002 with Fain and Mahan and the guy and Jordan Black and the guys who were playing, across that line. You had an offense that could make some hay too, but it looked so one-sided because Ty Willingham just did what he thought was the right way. Ones on ones, let's get after it. No excuses. We're going to get better by going good on good. Charlie, I always felt like, and maybe to the dismay of his defensive players, he favored the offense. He was our offensive coordinator. He wanted to make sure that we were confident. We went less ones on ones early until we got that offensive rhythm. And then it was probably fifth practice, sixth practice before we really started going good on good. And that allowed for some really great competitions because you didn't have that one-sided practice over and over again where the defense was winning. Maybe the defense just killed in the morning, but in the afternoon, the offense showed up and threw for 750 yards. And so they went about the good on good, the ones on ones part of fall camp completely differently.
And then in the broader picture, I mean, from a media standpoint, super different, but just in terms of, I would think, I know one thing that was hugely different was how many practice reps the backups got. That seemed like Charlie tilted it kind of to the pro model where the backups were taking mental reps. And that didn't hurt you guys because you were a veteran team. But boy, when that roster turned over in 2007, that's where he paid the price. But other than that, where do you see maybe the biggest difference, and were there any similarities?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and talk about perception and reality, right? Like I had mentioned to you, I'd love the opportunity to talk about Charlie. I think he's very misunderstood in a lot of ways. I think that Tyrone Willingham is one of the best human beings I've ever been around. I think he's extraordinarily consistent. What he says is what he does. He's a man of integrity, and I think almost to a fault, I think that there were recruits and then there were even players who felt like they couldn't be themselves around him because he was just such a model human being in a lot of ways. And I think sometimes he didn't do what you needed to do as the head football coach to stick around, right? Like, I think that one of the things that I'd said, I came from Texas high school football, and one of the things that I said early on in my career is there was an assistant coach on my high school team that I thought was a better assistant coach than one of the assistant coaches at Notre Dame at the time. And in the 3 years of limited success in year 2 and 3, Ty Willingham did not make any staff changes whatsoever. Matter of fact, said, listen, I'm not getting rid of anybody. If you want to get rid of a coach, you need to get rid of me. And Kevin White took him up on it, and that's what happened. Charlie Weiss, on the flip side, doesn't come across as a model human being, right? He comes across as a brash New Jersey personality, something that from an East Coast guy, I loved and appreciated, but not everybody does. The one thing I'd say about Charlie is, though, I don't think he gets enough credit for the big moments when he showed up. And I don't mean in-game moments. Yeah. I mean the big moments when life was like really brought into perspective. For me personally, my dad passed 3 weeks before the beginning of the 2006 season. And he allowed me to go home and bury my dad and then fly to Atlanta to meet the team and play that first game against Georgia Tech. Literally saying, Bob, I'm going to give you the first snap and I'm going to pull you out unless you do a really good job. Like, I'm going to leave you in there as long as you don't screw it up. And I ended up playing the entire game, really starting and playing the entire season. But it was what he did for me in that moment. Was similar situation. I don't know. We were at Washington, and he asked a young man who was losing his life that week. He died that week. And Charlie asked him, what play do you want us to run on the first play of the game?
Oh, yeah.
And the guy said, I want you to run a bootleg to Anthony Fasano. And we were on the 1 yard line coming out, the place where you don't want to run a bootleg to Anthony Fasano. And we still ran it. And that was just one of those big moments. I think Robert Hughes, years after I had played, I think lost his brother and didn't practice at all during the week, but we had the ball on the 3 yard line, and who trots out there to get a couple carries and get across the end zone? Robert Hughes does. And so like, love, hate, don't like Charlie Weiss, however you want from the outside, he knew how to show up in those big moments. I owe a lot to that man and how he allowed me to start the end of my career at Notre Dame.
Wow, great stuff. And Todd Krall piped in with pass right. That was the play. I actually won a national writing award for a story I wrote about that play. So I have great memories of it for lots of reasons. But from a media standpoint, those guys are really different to deal with. And neither one easy. I mean, Charlie got easy for me the last 2 years because we got along great. He hated my guts in 2007 and everybody else's, but I was near the top of that list. But in 2008, 2009, we saw things kind of the same way and had a good understanding, and it worked out. Tyrone was unbelievable when the tape recorder was off. He was incredible, and I can see why you had such a high opinion of him, because when he opened up, he was a fascinating guy, but very little of that did you ever see in the public, with the media and so forth. So
well, and let me tell you one story, right? And I've really done, I think, a yeoman's job over the course of my life and career of keeping things that happen in the locker room. But one of my favorite stories about Ty Willingham is one that no one would ever expect. So my freshman year, hadn't played a snap, wasn't planning to play a snap. We were going against Boston College. We were undefeated. Pat Dillingham was our quarterback. We had spent the entire week hearing the same things over and over from the coaching staff about what to expect, what the Eagles were going to be doing, everything, right? And we came out and kind of laid an egg in that first half. And I'd never heard Ty curse, let alone come anywhere close to cursing. And we come in at halftime, and Ty does not come and address the team. We are all on a knee waiting for him to come and talk to us. He's nowhere to be found. After about 3 or 4 minutes, I mean, it feels a lot longer when you're in it. He comes out wearing nothing but his khaki coaching pants and then like an Under Armour top. Now, he's not a college guy, right? He is not like college buff football player.
Yeah.
But Ty Willingham was jacked, okay? Like absolutely shredded. So he comes in front of the entire team wearing nothing but this spandex shirt, and he says, "Gentlemen, we told you what they were going to do, and they're doing it. We told you what you needed to do, and you're not doing it. Every single time you line up and you don't listen to what your coaches are saying," and he pauses, and you could see him like contemplate whether or not he was going to do it. He goes, "You're telling us to go screw ourselves," but he did not say screw. And it was like this moment where you're just like did Jesus just like step down and drop a bomb on us? Like what happened? And I'll never forget, like anybody who wasn't playing in the game, all us freshmen thought like, there's no way we're losing this game, right? And we came out and had a much better second half, but ultimately didn't win. But it was just like that moment. I'll never forget the time that I heard Ty Willingham say the F word. You know what I mean? It just sticks with me forever.
Very good. Well, he never said it to me, but Charlie did one time.
It's a term of endearment out on the East Coast, Is
it? Oh, okay. I see it very differently. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, we're going to jump back into our training camp discussion. Keep the questions coming because we're going to work these in. Some of them are a little bit off topic, but we'll find spots for them to get them in there. Some good questions, and keep the comments coming. I'm reading them. while Bob's talking and multitasking. This is a big day for me. I actually hit the go live button when I was supposed to. All right. As a player, can you get a sense of how good the team is going to be overall when the bright lights come on? When you're in camp and you're going through those days and you get to the opener, are you surprised how good or bad the team is?
No. I think the one thing that you get in camp, you get a pretty good idea of potential, right? Like you get a pretty good idea of how explosive a team can look and how fast a team can be, how aggressive and ball hawking a defense can be, how strong an offensive line can show up and be, how quick a quarterback can react. Like you get to see all the potential. And then I think those of us who've been around good, bad, and, somewhere in the middle teams have a pretty good sense of like, this has the potential to be pretty special. Not only can we run the ball, but we can throw the ball deep. Not only can we do that on offense, but we've got a pretty good front seven. Hey, if our DBs hold up, we're going to be able to be pretty solid this year. And so you're able to kind of see the things come together. And then there are those of us who I don't just see what the offensive line's doing. I always tried to see the bigger picture.
Right.
And I think you get to see glimpses of greatness in every camp. Then it comes to what kind of work ethic are you willing to have to make that potential become a reality, right? Like that's ultimately what has to happen is you've got to take that potential opportunity and greatness that you have and put it into motion against teams that are ultimately going to be better against you because your defense, even if individually they don't like you, they need you to perform. Texas A&M doesn't care, right? They don't want you to perform at all. So there's an element of hatred that goes into an opponent that doesn't happen when you're playing against your own guys.
And maybe this was different with Tyrone and Charlie, and maybe it was the same, but I wonder how much, the defense starts to learn your plays. They start to know what's coming. So we talk about iron sharpening iron, but if they know what's coming, how much is it really sharpening, or are there ways around that? Am I overestimating how much the defense knows?
No, well, listen, I mean, like the defense, there's some smart guys on the defensive side too, right? And if the coaches are just saying, hey, we need to get these same reps in to practice certain plays, and we're not getting game reps, then we have a script that we need to go through. And listen, the defense doesn't want to work any harder than they have to. So why pretend like you don't know what's coming when you know what's going to happen, right? So what I liked about that, though, is two things. One, a lot of times the defense knows what's coming because of tendencies that we have as offensive players, right? The old kind of white knuckle trick, right? Like if you got an offensive lineman who's showing you the white kind of underneath his fingernails, he's got extra weight on his hand, he's firing off. Well, right. You can't really pull if you got whites under your fingernails, can you? Well, unless you're squeezing the ground, then you're showing whites of your fingernails, but you're not actually putting weight on your hand. So like I always loved anytime the mental aspect of the game really came in because that's what I did supremely well. The other thing is don't forget the fact that these coaches want to be the best that they possibly can be. And so you can have an offensive coordinator get real ticked off that Al Golden is putting in, 4 blitzes, a practice and ratcheting things up on defense. Or you can be an offensive coordinator who's going to break from his script and burn Golden in one of those defenses. And so I just think that there comes this like friendly competition where the intellectual side of the game gets to come out. And that's what our team needs to be. We need to be smarter than the other teams we go against because we're going to be as athletic. We're going to be as strong. We're going to be as solid fundamentally. But we need to be able to be more creative and zig when they think we're going to zag. And you're going to get that by doing it against your own defense, especially a defense as good as what we have.
Right. We're going to get to we got some off-topic questions, but I want to get to one more thread in here before we throw those in, and then we're going to get offensive line specific. So the media window for us, Bob, for training camp, both full practices and partials, is going to be reduced this year. and my question is your take. Do you think this is the coaching staff being overcautious of what might get out? I mean, overcautious, or is this clearly pragmatic that this is necessary in this day and age where we're so connected by technology and things can spread so fast? So what would your take be on that?
Yeah, if I have to read between the lines, I just think the coaches are mad at you personally, Eric. I think that's the reason why media is not getting availability, is because of something that you've done. No, I
haven't made Marcus mad yet, but
no, not yet. No, he hasn't had an 07 type year, right? So,
right.
Listen, I think that this is eliminating distractions. Not that the media is distracting in and of itself, but I think that the coaches realize that they need to be so laser focused about getting this team cohesive as a unit that it's just easier to not think outside of what the job is, right? Because anytime the media is around, there's inherently some masking that goes on with certain coaches, right? Certain coaches that have a certain personality in front of the cameras, that the minute those cameras turn off, they just turn into a monster. I think that you need everyone to be solely focused on what Notre Dame football needs to do to run the table this year, that you don't have time for masking. So I think that, limiting some of that, I don't think it's an abundance of caution, because I don't think there's anything that we're going to show that you never show a zig unless there's also a zag in your arsenal. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. Like, hey, listen, fine, take my practice film, all I care, because we need to have an offensive coordinator and an offensive scheme that everything that we can do one way, there's a counter to it. And if you know everything that I can do one way, then I'm going to use that against you to set up the counter, right? The old infamous Mike Leach, when he was an assistant coach at Oklahoma, it was between Texas and Oklahoma, and he left a fake call sheet out on the field. So other team, he left the first 20 plays, a fake 20 plays out there, so the opposing defense would set up against that 20 plays, and then they burned him for an 85-yard touchdown, right? I just think that it's not a fear of this getting out, but we've got to stay focused on exactly what's at hand. And for the team, the media is secondary to the job of getting this team ready.
Okay. We're going to get to some of these questions now, and these are kind of more of a hodgepodge. Some of them are right what we're talking about, but we're going to be talking about in Bob's wheelhouse, offensive line with relation to training camp here in just a second. So let's start with, okay, this is from Jeff Stevens. Bob, what can we do? He doesn't want to know what I think. What can Notre Dame do to improve the ND fan game experience outside of the game? Do you think the alum tier donation ticket availability is working well or could be improved? Thanks, Bob.
Well, thank you, Jeff. You win the award this week of putting me in a position where my athletic thoughts and my working for Notre Dame thoughts are at odds with each other. So obviously the kind of alumni tier donation ticket availability program is actually really unique in a lot of major college football programs. There are a lot of schools that you have to give directly to the athletic department in order to gain access to kind of that tiered system of ticket availability, where at Notre Dame, it's not that way at all. There's nothing, you don't have to earmark anything for athletics. And so there are a lot of folks that are able to enjoy, access to tickets for football games that wouldn't be giving to Notre Dame athletics. And so it's something that sets us apart as a university, which I think is a really, really positive thing. As a football player, Jeff, I'll be honest with you, I would really love for Notre Dame's game day experience to be a little less mystique and mystical and special and a little more badass. You know what I mean? Like, I wish there was just a little bit more that would get that stadium really raucous, because you and I both know that I think Notre Dame's really good at being loud for like the first half of the first quarter. And then whenever there's a jab thrown by the other team, there seems to be a wave of people in different areas of the stadium that sit down. And when they sit down, most people sit down, with the exception usually of the student section. And so unless you have a game like USC last year where we were just pummeling that offense the entire game and everybody wanted to see Caleb Williams just get beat up and did, I think most of the time the stadium gets pretty quiet and we become just an average in-game stadium experience. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I do think that Marcus has made some good changes in terms of kind of noise and volume and music. I think adding the video board is a massive win for a lot of reasons. I think that our game day overall experience is really positive. But yeah, I'd love to brainstorm a little bit about how we could get a little bit of a home field advantage beyond, a team comes in the day before, sees touchdown Jesus, sees the grotto, and realizes they're playing on hallowed ground. I'd like there to be a little bit more intimidation in the stadium.
Well, my one suggestion is never again play Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle during a big game like they did in the Ohio State game. That was a mood killer.
Yeah, probably not. Stick with the Crazy Train, some of the new hip hop, and let's avoid that.
Okay, we'll give you a little bit of feedback here. We got, this is fun. Bob's brilliant. We have Bob is so great, so candid. And now we're going to go to, I'm not sure that I get this question, so maybe you can, when are we going to get to the Crank Me Up team mantra stories? Real ones, remember that wildness. Do you know what he's talking about there, Todd Krall?
So I don't know what Crank Me Up team mantra stories are. I don't know if that was, that might have been some of my years when I was just like the quiet guy in the locker room in the corner, or that was a couple years after me. Yeah, we usually didn't have a difficult time kind of getting up and ready for the game. Usually in our locker rooms, it was always Todd's like, Google it. You know what, man? You can send me an email later, Todd. I just think that for teams that I was on, the offense was always, we've got a job to do. We're business as usual. The defense gets up and gets crazy.
We'll give Todd another one because he threw you a compliment saying you would be amazing radio or TV guy. I agree. What was it like playing against Roman as it rains in 06 when you played Georgia Tech?
Yeah, so Roman Reigns, it's funny, whenever they bring up Roman Reigns' football career, they show a highlight that he had hitting Brady Quinn. I'm very happy that was against Dan Santucci and not me. So what I'll say is, Roman Reigns certainly wasn't the tribal chief back in 06. I had no real thought of who I was playing at the time. But yeah, it's pretty cool being able to, like, my son has recently gotten into the WWE and, he looks at Roman Reigns like he's some sort of god. And I get to say, yeah, well, we took his team out to begin my last season at Notre Dame. So, be that as it may, or take that as you will. I couldn't do half the things that Roman Reigns can do, but when I had the chance, I beat him. So there was that.
Okay, let's see here. Let's go to Brian and Brian's candidates for leading tackler replacing Bertrand. I'll go first to give you time to think. I'm gonna go with Jack Kaiser here. Jack has been remarkably productive as a rover and as kind of a part-time player. He's had as many or more tackles than Maris Leofau, playing a little bit more than half the snaps that Maris played. And I just think when Coach Bola said that Jack Kaiser was the most improved defensive player from the Sun Bowl to the start of spring practice, he's bigger now. He's playing in his wheelhouse at the will linebacker position. So this is the position that he's kind of designed to play. That's where I'm gonna go with Jack Kaiser.
Yeah, so I'm actually not going to disagree with you. I'm going to say, I could see him, Jalen Sneed at the Rover being leading tacklers. I think when you look at how a team is normally designed, you expect the middle linebacker to be the leading tackler. The only reason I don't go with Drake Bowen is because I think that you're going to see over the course of the season maybe some split time between him and KVA. Yeah, I think that if you're starting the year with KVA, he might very well be the leading tackler. Guys, I can't say enough how fun it was to watch the spring game. and watch him. I mean, I loved J.D. Bertrand. I loved watching him play. But KVA has a certain, not a Ray Lewis in terms of being a punisher, but a Ray Lewis in terms of the second he's diagnosed to play, his feet are already moving towards the hole. And he beat offensive linemen to the line of scrimmage multiple times to either stretch a play out or to make a play right there at the line of scrimmage. So I think that next year, it might be a pretty easy. I think KVA is going to be the leading tackler, but this upcoming season, I'd give it to one of the guys who's going to be starting from day one on the outside. I think, what you said, Jack Kaiser is probably going to be the guy in his natural position, doing things that he does well, being able to diagnose plays on the fly with his level of experience too.
Okay, we're going to go one more in this run, and then we'll get back to some of these later. And keep sending us questions. Bob, what guys that you played with do you still stay in touch with?
Yeah, it's really fun having my role. I spent a lot of time kind of stepping away from Notre Dame and kind of just not being ashamed of playing at Notre Dame, but just trying to get away. There's a lot of stories to that. Had some time as a chaplain with Brian Kelly as the coach, and then took a decade off there of really being active around campus. So the first year or two, I was really kind of getting in touch with folks when they would come back on campus. And now everyone knows that I'm kind of a mainstay on Friday nights where the football team comes back. I get to see Jeff Fain really regularly when he's back on campus and have really enjoyed getting to know him as a man beyond football. One of the scariest human beings I've ever met in my life, but also one of the kindest and greatest.
Jeff Fain is okay.
Yeah. Listen, as a freshman coming, I remember my recruiting visit sitting down with a lot of players who were trying to tell me all these great stories and make sure I had fun. And I hung out at a dorm party, and then Jeff Fain sat me down in his room and put on film of this no-name lineman from the University of Miami, and he just said, I watch this 3 times a week, and you need to start doing that too. And that was my hour and a half with Jeff Fain, was watching this highlight reel of this center who just bit kneecaps of guys left and right. And so I absolutely loved getting to kind of reconnect with Jeff Fain. A lot of guys that I was recruited with and came in with, I'm still really close with. Jake Carney didn't get a lot of playing time. He actually broke his back while at Notre Dame, was a groomsman at my wedding. Jake and I are really, really close. James Bent is a walk-on lineman from here in Mishawaka. He and I are incredibly close. Scott Raridan, who's Eli Raridan's dad, back when Eli was a 14-pound baby, I got to rock him while he was crying one time.
Wow.
And so, so that makes me feel super old. But yeah, so all these guys coming back, Victor Abiamiri and Trevor Laws, got to see them quite a bit last year. It's been a really enjoyable process for me. As a guy who, I think I said a little bit last week, I wasn't everybody's cup of tea while I was here. And I became more relatable after my dad had passed and I was kind of grieving. I just kind of stepped into the fellowship of the team a little bit more. It's been really great to see people doing well and to spend more and more time with them and to understand how deep our Notre Dame roots really run. So, yeah, that's a long answer to a short question, but it's a still growing list of people that I get to reconnect with.
Brian and John, good questions. We'll get to them in a second. I'm going to put Todd's comment here or explanation on the board. Last ever comment on Crank Me Up. It was a team mantra in 2008. It was kind of dumb, but even Adidas made a shirt of it. If you Google it now, we never have to talk about it again. Okay. Well, Bob was gone by 2008. And I was in a fog still from the 2007 season being so bad and just reconnecting with Charlie. That's maybe why we didn't remember it. But we're going to segue into offensive line specific talk. Bob, we talked about how offensive lines improve in the spring and the summer. Now with contact being reintroduced and there's more urgency, what changes in the dynamic of positional improvement as these guys get into fall camp?
Yeah, so everything that these guys have done since they took pads off in the spring has been about increasing their potential. right? They've gotten stronger, they've gotten faster, they've gotten leaner, they've gotten bigger. They've watched an untold amount of film. They've worked one-on-one with a defensive lineman on pass rush moves, whatever it is that they're doing, right? Everything that they're doing is about increasing their potential. But as I had an old coach tell me a long time ago, and I'll risk the language on this one, all potential means is you ain't done shit yet, right? And that's like all these players that have increased their potential, like it changes the math whenever this newfound potential goes in between the 53 yards of sideline to sideline and has full contact involved. And so will all of this potential go out the window and we'll have kind of a return to what the normal was last year for that player? Or will some of the changes they made to kind of increase their perception and the way their mind is working really really kind of take root and show a different level to how these guys can compete? Let me go ahead and put it this way. My fourth year, Dan Santucci, the year before, was a defensive lineman. And in spring ball, came out to really try and be an offensive lineman and was a little bit lost, right? Like just the way he used his body, he was always out over his toes. He was hyper aggressive, didn't know how to pass set. Like he had a lot of work to do. And then he had an entire summer of changing his body and changing the way he did things and working on pass sets and getting himself ready. And then when he showed up in fall camp it would have been 2005, he wasn't going 70%. He was going 100% and bringing physicality to the position that made everybody, not just the coaches, say, whoa, he's ready. And so you're hopefully going to have multiple people show up, and that first time they run into somebody in practice, that first time they pick up that blitzing linebacker, the first time that they do something special to spring that running back, all the coaches are going to kind of look at each other and say, he's ready. And so that's all you're looking for from all of the work they've put in is, will it translate to them having the aggressiveness they need to go helmet to helmet against somebody else?
Okay, following up on that, we've got two positions that are really open on the offensive line. I think it'd be a big shock if anybody else got replaced at this point. But Emil Wagner and Tosh Baker at right tackle, Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler at left guard. How deep can Marcus, Joe Rudolph, Mike Denbrock, how deep can they go into fall camp with these battles going on without sacrificing maybe cohesion and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So one interesting thought about that is I'll say like there's a balance, right? Because you build cohesion by players seeing players compete for jobs. You build that cohesion by someone going out there and earning their spot, not being given that spot. And I think it's really key to let these players go in there and just flat out battle. And it's okay for Tosh and Emil to respect each other and not like each other for a little while. It's okay for Jack and Rocco to not sit next to each other while they're eating for a little while. And to go out there and do their job and say, like, this is my job to lose. I'm going to take it from this other guy. Because if you can go out there and earn that job, everybody's watched you do that, and you belong. And that cohesion, that trust is built in that process. Now, ultimately, you don't want to have somebody try and earn that job 2 days before you go to College Station to play Texas A&M. If I had to guess on timing, I think the coaches will know who their starter is going to be a full 2 weeks before they go down to College Station. I don't think you'll know. I don't think we'll know. I don't think they're going to tell anybody until maybe Thursday before the game. But I think they're going to have a really good idea of who has proven themselves in the first week of camp. Because, again, it's not about potential at that point. It's about who can translate potential onto the field.
Okay. We're going to go to a couple of questions here before we move on. From Brian, what is the difference between the right guard and left guard positions, Bob? Which spot did you play besides center?
Yeah, so I've got a pretty cool story. So I came in as a highly recruited center. I backed up Jeff Fain. I started at center the next year.
Did you play center in high school?
Yeah, played center in high school as well.
Okay.
We had graduated a left guard, and so our next best lineman was John Sullivan. So I went to John McDonnell and said, "Hey, listen, I don't mind putting my left hand down." I had started putting my left hand down and getting some backup reps just because I wanted to strengthen myself as a lineman and I wanted to get away from some unilateral tendencies. And so in spring, he put Sully at center and me at left guard, and that worked out really well for us. So I started my second year at left guard. Came into camp, came spring ball with Charlie Weiss, and he wanted me to come back to center. And so he moved me back to center. Sully became kind of the rotational guy who would bump me to guard. And so we had a 6-man offensive line, a 4-man rotation in between for my entire third year playing. And then Dan Stevenson, my right guard, graduated, and the natural progression was for me to go to right guard and play my 5th year as right guard. So I started for 4 consecutive seasons, but I never started at the same position 2 years in a row. To answer your question about what's the difference, there's no difference schematically. It's all a matter of comfort, right? And so for me, I felt like if I got too comfortable at right guard, I would develop some tendencies, and you'd be able to tell that I was going to pull, or you'd be able to tell that I was going to take a certain type of set. I wanted to look like a generic video game offensive lineman in my stance, and that meant I needed to be balanced. So I wanted everything that I could do right, I wanted to go to the left and do that. Not everyone can do that. I'm not saying that I'm top 5% O lineman. I'm just saying some people who are right hand dominant can only play on the right side. It's how their brain works, it's how their body works, and they can't flip that. For me, I felt I was better by becoming ambidextrous in terms of which hand I put down. And the job is still the same. It's just about making sure that you can flip everything in your brain, which, again, I wasn't always the most physically talented. I wasn't always the fastest, strongest. But in terms of when I could bring my game to the party, I was going to do, or my brain to the party, I was going to do pretty well.
I'm curious. I'll throw a little one in here before, and we got a compliment there. So from Irish fan, but I don't think you had a left-handed quarterback during your time, but I mean, Malik Zaire was a lefty, Deuce Knight is a lefty who's going to be coming in 2025. Would that reprogram you as a lineman, knowing your quarterback was left-handed? Being an interior lineman, I realize it'd be bigger deal for the tackles.
Yeah, so I think it does, right? I do think we're past the days where, your best lineman has to be the one protecting your quarterback's blind side. I just think that we have systems that can block a little bit better than we used to, and so it's not just big on big the entire time. I do think, however, when you have a lefty quarterback, you have to think of escape routes for the quarterback, right? So if Brady Quinn gets pressure from his right side, he's then rolling to the left and has to flip his shoulders to try and get the ball and not throw, just throw a duck out there. He's got to do so much to square up and try and deliver the ball unless he's just going to run out of bounds. If he was rolling to the right, it could be a touchdown on a deep crosser from a receiver, Jeff Samardzija, Maurice Stovall, who's escaping deep across the field late. So for the lefty, you're going to have someone rolling to the right who is going to have to flip his hips or his shoulders to deliver the ball, but is going to naturally want to run to his throwing hand side. So that's the part that you have to flip in your mind, but ultimately you're determining where the release point should be when you're developing the protection, whether it's a half roll, a full roll, a straight drop back, a quick set, whatever it might be. And so you've got to block that first. and then your quarterback's tendencies don't really factor in until your internal clock has gotten to about 3 seconds, and you know the ball's either gone or the quarterback's escaping the way he normally does.
Okay, let's see. One more, and then we're going to move on a little bit. Let me see. John Baker had one I wanted to get up here. John, Bob, did you sense any of your coaches played favorites?
Listen, if they played favorites for me, I was always one of them, right? But I do think that, for whatever reason, you have individuals that get a really long leash, and then you see individuals who don't get that same leash, and that's what favorites look like, right? It's not like somebody's getting invited over for a barbecue and somebody's getting left out. It's everybody gets some type of opportunity, but one player gets one mistake and they're out, and one player gets to make the same damn mistake again and again and still gets an opportunity. And there are times where you're just like, I don't understand why we're not giving this guy that chance. And so, yeah, coaches play favorites, but I never, even I would share with you an example if I had one, but looking back, I just can't think of any examples where it was so egregious that it ingrained itself in my memory.
Okay. We're going to move on to some mechanics, key camp figures, and personnel. So we're each going to share 5 players whose camp performances are most likely to give us an indication of how the season might play out. And I'm really curious if we have any that are the same, but I'll let you go first and then I'll do my 5.
Oh, no, I'm not doing this one.
Oh,
I specifically said I wanted to hear your 5 first.
Okay.
Because I've got one that's kind of a group that I will adjust to an individual depending on where you go.
Well, you're big enough to tell me, and strong enough, meaning big enough and strong enough to make me go first. So I will go with, obviously Riley Leonard, because there's so much question about which Riley Leonard we're going to get. And I think, to me, I believe we will get the best version of Riley Leonard that we have seen in college. That is my expectation. And if that indeed happens, it elevates this offense considerably when you pair him with Mike Denbrock. Number 2, I went with Chris Mitchell, and he's representative of the wide receivers, but he's the guy with the elite speed that plays on the outside. He plays Will Fuller's position, Kevin Stefferson, and when Notre Dame has had that guy that can take the top off a defense, it's opened up the rest of the offense. They want speed at all the wide receiver positions, but when there's that much field to cover, it makes the defensive coordinator make more decisions when that guy is elite. Emil Wagner, I put kind of as a representative of the offensive line. I think he's the one we know the least about of all the guys competing for spots. He's the one that's played the least. On defense, I went with 2 guys. I went with Jalen Sneed. He has been an elite athlete up to this point. If you did a combine, he would have one of the highest scores in just about everything, but we haven't seen him yet be a consistent elite linebacker. And then the last one for me is Rod Hurd II. He's the transfer from Northwestern who's slotted to start at safety. Now, Notre Dame has some alternatives if that doesn't work out, but if he's as good as they think he is, having played nickel a lot of the time, having nickel speed, and being able to do that at safety, I think that's the difference with Notre Dame being maybe a top 5 defense and maybe a top 1 or 2 defense in the country. I think they can maybe get to that level, and those 2 guys are 2 of the keys. So those are my 5.
Yeah, love it. I think we do have some overlap, right? So number 1 for me is Riley Leonard. You look at him and what he did at Duke. He had a defensive coach, really the offense was built around him rather than him just being the key part in the offense. So if anything happened where his skill set was diminished, the entire offense was diminished. I think you pair him with an offensive coordinator who knows how to use a mobile quarterback and also the type of athletes we have around him. I think that he becomes a quarterback with a skill set that can be maximized in Denbrock's offense with the athletes that Notre Dame has. And yet we're not hinging every game on an ankle, right? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's like, if we keep him healthy and we utilize him as a runner in key moments rather than every moment, I think that's really good for us. On the offensive side of the ball, I went with Jeremiah Love. He got some reps at receiver during the spring just to expand really his abilities and his comfort in catching the ball out of the backfield. I put him, and really I could say the running back, stable that we've kind of produced over the last several years, really, really important because we have not utilized our backs out of the backfield at all. One of the biggest ways that we could have done some we have done big things badly is that we've pretty much told teams whether we're going to run or pass based off of alignment at times, and I think Denbrock fixes that. I would love to see Jeremiah Love with as much rushing yards as he had, splitting time in the backfield, but also being a threat out of the backfield and lining up in the slot. I went with Jalen Sneed at the Rover. I thought Jalen Sneed had the skills and the ability to improve our defense even last year, except that, Marist played out of his mind for a good while. And Jalen just didn't seem to have the type of production when he was on the field. If we hear a fall camp that Jalen Sneed is producing, as Notre Dame fans, we should be really excited. My number 4, listen, I want to know for later in the year, how is Benjamin Morrison doing? I think that we've got, dare I say, a stable of cornerbacks that are solid, that can do well. What Benjamin Morrison can do is special. What he has a history of doing is special. We are going to face elite wide receivers against elite teams, and what he can do to eliminate that threat for majority of the game without drawing a boatload of penalties is unique and special. He takes an Al Golden defense that will be a top 10 defense without him and make a top 2 or 3 defense with him. And so I want to know how he's progressing. He's clearly got an NFL career that he's going to be thinking of, but we need to get him on the field and healthy and producing. And then my number 5 just was receivers. I love the route you went with Chris Mitchell. I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to say the combination of Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. One of the things that excited me in the Sun Bowl last year is we got to see them, run 2 receivers out of the slot. Jaden Greathouse went out wide a little bit more in that game, but I think Greathouse could be an elite slot receiver, but Faison presents some unique challenges that even Greathouse doesn't. So I think the combination of them pairs really well for some of our holdover receivers to create a top 4 or 5 receivers. I want to see what we get out of the slot, because where you see the need to have, somebody break the top off of the defense, which is important, I just see a lot of outlets in blocking schemes where we need to get the ball out quick. Can we count on our slot receiver to make the right read, the right hot route to get the ball quickly when there's more coming in pressure than we can block up front?
I think that's great. And I do think they, depending on the strengths of the defenses, they present different things. Greathouse is so physical in the red zone and is such a good route runner. And Faison's got big time speed and big time lacrosse skills, but big time speed down the field. Okay, we're going to skip to the 3 most important things on Mike Denbrock's to-do list. If you want to shorten the list, you can, but what do you think is the most important thing for him to accomplish during fall camp?
Yeah, 3 things I put are mechanics, pass protection, and just the offensive confidence. By mechanics, it's a new offense, right? You're going to go into a loud environment. Some of the offenses that he was a part of with Brian Kelly were really, really bad working with silent counts and things of that nature. It's something he obviously fixed when he was in the SEC. But you got to figure out like getting plays in and out of the huddle, making sure you have audibles at the line of scrimmage. What's the blocking scheme going to be if there are any changes, the cadence, the tempo, like what is going to make this the Mike Denbrock version of Notre Dame? I think that's going to be really important early on. We know that this offensive line can run block. We know that they can put a hat on a hat and get yards the majority of games. But when you get 8, 9, 10 in the box, you can't do that all day. So you really got to make sure that you can be solid in pass protection. So I think that's going to be a big focus of his in camp as well. And then you're going against a top 5 probably defense from day one. And so how are you going to get the kind of reps you need to build the offensive confidence to then go out and steamroll a team that's not going to have a defense that's as good as yours? So I think that's what Mike Denbrock has to manage in fall camp coming up.
Okay. We are past 8 o'clock, and I don't know, you have to read bedtime stories to anybody. Can you hang on for 5 more minutes?
Yeah, listen, I'll give you 10.
Okay.
we can keep rolling as long as you're ready to.
Okay. Let's go. As long as I don't hit the end stream thing, I think we're in good shape. So what would be the top 3 priorities then for Al Golden, would you say?
Oh, good question. Good question.
I think want me to do those?
What was that?
Do you want me to tell you mine?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can ramble, but let's hear you first, since you probably prepped it because you're more prepared than I am. And then I've got a couple things coming to mind.
Yeah, I think he has an easier to-do list than a shorter one. But for me, it's who are the best defensive end and the rotation shares there. I think, there's 2 obvious starters, and I think it'll end up being RJ Oben and Jordan Botello. But Boubacar Traore and there are 2 really good young defensive ends on the other side, I think are going to make these pretty deep positions. For me, the second thing is setting the rotation at linebacker and figuring out the roles. Who comes off the field when they go to nickel? And they are going to play a lot of nickel. So you'll have a lot of 2 linebacker looks. You'll also have some where you drop Jalen Sneed down and be a defensive end kind of position, rushing the passer. And then for me, you alluded to this with Ben Morrison. Notre Dame does have some really good backup cornerbacks, but 2 of them are freshmen and they're not super deep. So getting the young cornerbacks ready in case there are injuries and they do need to use these guys. So now I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah, no, that's a solid list. 3 I came up with. Number 1 is like you've got to find a way to start fresh, right? There can't be a hangover. You brought back some guys that we didn't expect to come back. That was a big win, including for a lot of us, Coach Golden coming back, right? Like we thought there was an opportunity of him, finding other opportunities. And so making sure that we really like lock down and say we're going to start new, and like the stats from last year don't carry over. You know what I mean? I think that mentality is going to be really, really important. The second thing I have is like pressure without numbers. One of the things that drove me a little crazy last year is I felt like I was surprised whenever J.D. Bertrand wasn't rushing the quarterback from depth. I felt like we did it all the time. We always rushed 5, and J.D. always started from his linebacker and rushed. And I think finding a way to get pressure, I think that, you could also say one of the top 5 people could be RJ Oben, could be Jordan Botello. We need to see if we can get some pressure on the outside, some really constricting pressure without having to blitz all the time, or we blitz creatively. I like Brian. I agree. Too much blitzing last year. But if we blitz creatively where we end up dropping, Jordan into the flats and we end up kind of slanting the line and bringing pressure that way, you're still only bringing 7 people back. You're just changing the look you give the quarterback. It's really important that we see getting pressure without adding numbers. And then, I have similar, like, how can we get the linebackers flying around? I don't know that we have like the top 3 that are head and shoulders above everybody else that are going to be on the field for, 500 snaps for the entirety of the year. The question is like, what kind of rotation can we utilize to make sure that when Jalen Sneed's on the field, like, yeah, there's an opportunity for him to bring pressure off the edge, which might be the best thing that he does. So what are we doing with each of these linebackers to make sure that we're maximizing their reps on the field?
I'll tell you, Bob, they're exciting to watch because they're such good athletes, and there are waves of these guys coming in this next recruiting class. They're trying to nail that down, and we'll segue into recruiting real quickly.
Yeah.
So people probably wonder what's going on with the wide receivers. So Notre Dame was in on 3 wide receivers that are announcing their decisions this week. Tanook Hines picked USC on Monday. Dylan Robinson announces on Thursday. Don't feel great about that one, but Notre Dame was pitching in there. Now, if he goes to one of the other 2 schools, Washington or UCLA, he will do so as a safety. And then we have Derek Meadows on Saturday. That's the one I think everybody's wondering about. 6'5" kid from Las Vegas, Bishop Poorman. I mean, that's a coin flip. The fact that he moved his decision date back a week, I think, gave Notre Dame another run at him. I believe on Wednesday, the coaching staff will get Notre Dame coaching staff will get their last word in with him. I'm not sure what he doesn't know about Notre Dame at this point, but the thing is, I think if they have to go to plan B, I think it's more forgiving in this day and age with the transfer portal, and Notre Dame did pretty well with the transfer portal last year. I think they'll do really well. And they may be able to flip somebody out of another class, including maybe one of the guys that, well, like even a Tanook Hines that committed to USC, maybe he'd be open to it. As far as what else Notre Dame is recruiting, they're looking at a safety named Brandon Logan, who has been committed to Vanderbilt for baseball since he was 14 years old. They would offer him the chance to play baseball and football at Notre Dame. And then the 2 really stud linebackers, Madden Framo from California, and who am I forgetting? Nathaniel Owusu Boateng from IMG in Florida. That's Jeremiah's half-brother. And I think they're in a good place with both of those, but none of these are slam dunks. And the one thing somebody mentioned in a question, I'll try to answer it real quick. And Bob, you can weigh in on this. Is Deuce Knight going to end up signing with Notre Dame? He has been incredibly invested to this point. I mean, he's made trips up from Mississippi to all these big recruiting events. You see him online trying to get, receivers and offensive players, even defensive players, close the deal on them. But we're in a different age where money and things can sway young people. And I think Notre Dame is competitive in the NIL space, but I do think that teams like Ole Miss and Auburn are going to keep running at Deuce Knight until the very end and try to change his mind based on geography, based on other things. But I do think that he'll stay in the class. What's your thoughts on Deuce?
Yeah, I think that he's been really impressive to me, right? So for me, I really started paying attention to him when I kept seeing a bunch of people freak out that he was going to be leaving, right? He was going to flip to this school or that school or whatever he might do. And for a young man of his age, just of his position, to really dissuade a lot of those worries and concerns has been impressive. I think that when Bob Davies was fired and the George O'Leary mess happened back in 2001/2, I like to think that I was doing as good a job as I could back in those days to try and make sure all the Texas folks that were come to Notre Dame were going to come to Notre Dame and really try and build a camaraderie in that class. It's a whole different ball game when you've got a stud quarterback coming in who's got his face all over the place, who's saying, no, I'm committed to this class. And so I think that carries a lot of weight. I want to remind anybody who sees this, who's watched this long, I want to remind Notre Dame fans that this is what it looks like to go after the best. I think that Notre Dame has always had its run of 4-star guys, great 3-star guys. We've gotten, guys that are studs in some ways, but I think that Coach Freeman, even as an assistant prior to becoming the head coach, really lifted the cap on the type of athletes we were going to recruit moving forward. And we have been in the conversation for folks that we might not have gotten in the conversation previously. And that means we're going to lose some of these recruiting battles, but that's okay, because for every one that we lose, there's another one that we're taking another step further. And this is what it takes to build a type of Notre Dame that exists at the pinnacle of college football for a generation, not just for 1 or 2 years. And so if we don't get any of these guys, listen, we've got the best coach in the country who can go in with the best sales pitch in the country to get graduate transfers. And we've got a university who's working more and more on getting not yet graduate transfers in. And so I like where we're positioned in this overall recruiting battle, where we're positioned with NIL, what we bring to the table that's not NIL, the type of individuals we're recruiting. We're in a pretty darn good spot. And with Marcus Freeman at the helm, you know what? I'm a ride or die for him, man. Even if I wasn't a Notre Dame fan, he'd have brought me back.
Well, I'm going to ride or die with Bob Morton, and we're going to wrap up the longest ever Football Never Sleeps episode by saying use code NDYT for a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com. I want to thank Legacy Heating and Air for sponsoring us. I want to thank Bob Morton's children for not storming in and telling him, Dad, you've been on the internet too long tonight. We're cutting you off from your screen time. And I want to remind you, Bob is going to be back with us next week. We're not sure yet when we're going to do the show, but we will get it out on social media early next week when Bob gets back from his trip. He is going. Do you want to tell him where you're going?
Yeah, so I'll be down in New Orleans, Louisiana. My 40th birthday is actually in the fall. I'll be hosting a nice birthday tailgate before one of the games this year. But because the fall's so crazy with a lot of things going on around the university, we're heading out a little bit earlier. I had such a great time when we were there for the Sugar Bowl, with the exception of the game. Had some really great food when I was there.
I did too.
Yeah, so we're going down. Just a few friends. My brother's going to drive out from Fort Worth and spend a few days down there, just enjoying the food, enjoying the culture, enjoying the nightlife a little bit, and then we'll be back early next week.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for your questions and comments. If we didn't get to all of them, I apologize. But you know what? We didn't have any technical hiccups that I am aware of yet. So thanks again. We'll talk to you next week.
See you guys later.